Get started. Uh, we'll be, we will be talking this afternoon about our budget, as well as there'll be a brief presentation.
The president made it very clear just last night with this retaliatory strike.
Everyone who is, if everyone could mute, please. Thank you. So we'll be talking today about the budget, and we will also have a brief presentation from Allison White and Mark Gusto regarding the Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month activities we've had so far. The way that we're going to structure today's meeting is I'll briefly go over our COVID data first, as always. Then I'll do the budget presentation, and then I will ask Mark and Allison to do the presentation regarding Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. And following that, we'll address all the questions that people have regarding the budget. Doing that little break in the middle will allow, if people can type their questions in at any time, please type them into the chat. And in this way, we will be able, if we have to have any discussion, or if I have to consult with our AFO or HR or anyone here to be able to answer the question, we'll be able to do that while Mark and Allison are doing their presentation about Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. So if we could start off by sharing the COVID data, please. Okay, so things have slowed down, fortunately. In the month of March, we have had 6 people who tested positive for COVID. We've had a total now of 807 people who have tested positive for COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. By placement type, it has been 1 person in a correctional facility, 24 people in host homes, 153 people in intermediate care facilities, 1 in a mental health facility, 179 in natural homes, 2 in a nursing home, 7 in out-of-state placement, 62 in residential habilitation, and 378 in supported living. We have, fortunately, not had anyone who has required hospitalization for COVID treatment since December of 2022. And we still have had only, well, we have had no confirmed COVID related deaths since September of 2021. There have been 83 people who have had COVID who have died. However, only 38 of these have been confirmed as COVID related deaths. There are 35 that are confirmed as not COVID related. We have the cause of death as something other than COVID, and 10 where the cause of death is still pending. And in terms of vaccination, people supported by DDA, the vaccination rate is at 89%. In host homes, it's 96%. ICFs is 98%. Natural homes is 76%. Residential habilitation is 100%. Supported living, 98%. And vaccinations for people supported or boosters, at least 1 booster is 77%. The monitoring of whether someone is current with vaccinations and boosters is a health and wellness function that we're not tracking in this same way. So that's done individually because different people would have different vaccination and booster requirements. Among provider staff, 98% have received a vaccination, 72% are current with a booster. Among DDS staff, we have not been tracking this since the requirement was rescinded in September of 2022. At that time, we had 98% of our staff who had been vaccinated. So next up, we have our budget presentation. So our FY24 proposed budget is an increase from our FY23 approved budget from 197.9 million in FY23 up to 203.7 million in FY24. The way that this is broken down by administration at DDS, there's some asterisks here that I would like to explain to people. So at any rate, for our FY24 budget, what is reflected here is actually, so if you've looked at the budget book, you will see that what is reflected here is slightly different from the budget book. We had mentioned last year that there was an error in our direct care budget line. There was $1 million that was allocated to DDA that should have been RSA. And that administrative error was never corrected in the budget. And so that $1 million less in RSA carried over into what was our approved FY23 RSA budget, showing 20.6 million. And it also carries over into the budget book that you'll see online, which reflects that DDA has a local funds budget in FY24 of $153.2 million. And RSA, according to the budget book, has a local funds budget of $20.6 million. That million, what you're seeing on the screen is what will be reflected after the correction is made, and that correction will be made this year. And then the disability determination division, which is purely federal funds, is $12 million for FY24.
And you take my phone.
And agency management is 14.8 million, and financial operations, which is our contribution for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, is 1.9 million. Overall, from fiscal year 23 to 24, the most significant change that you will see is that there is, in actual dollar changes, about a $5.4 million increase in the Developmental Disabilities Administration budget and a $27,000 increase in the Rehabilitation Services Administration budget. This is showing the $1 million shift, but that $1 million should have shifted last year. So in actual dollars, there's 5.4 million more in DDA and about flat. It's about $27,000 more in RSA. So where these funds come from overall, what you see for the agency overall in local funds from FY23 to FY24 is an increase in local funds of $6.4 million. There is a decrease in special purpose revenue. Special purpose revenue are funds that we collect on behalf. Most of that is Social Security funds, SSI, SSDI that we collect on behalf of people we support. It's also some funds that come in for RSA's Randolph-Shepard program. The $2.6 million reduction is an adjustment to align our budget with what our collections have been in the past year and our projection for FY24. Federal grant funds is $34.3 million. The change there is pretty minor. It's $36,000 in change there. And then federal Medicaid payments, there's an increase just like with the special purpose revenue, this reflects our projection of what those earnings will be next year. And then federal ARPA payments, it's 99,000. For our telehealth initiative, we have utilized the home and community-based services ARPA funds, as well as municipal ARPA funds that are available through the mayor's office. We actually launched the telehealth initiative with funds from the mayor's office telehealth ARPA funds, and have added funds to that project through our HCBS ARPA funds. Our HCBS ARPA funds generally are reflected in DHCF's budget. The way that the ARPA funds have worked is the district had, from April 2021 until the end of March 2020. No, yes, that is correct. From April 2021 until the end of March 2022, there was an enhanced federal match of 10%, which was a savings to the district. Those funds were then set aside and can be used for these ARPA initiatives. All funds have to be expended by March of 2025, and to the extent they are not expended, those funds go back to the federal government. Our ARPA plan, people may be aware, our ARPA plan is available on our website and DHCF's website, detailing the various ways that we are spending those funds. However, as I said, you don't see those funds reflected in our budget. So our staffing across the agency, we have 428 FTEs, 428 positions. Those are broken down across the agency. There are 185 in DDA, 106.5 in RSA, and we moved one position from the Disability Determination Division over to RSA. So you see a reduction in DDA and an increase in RSA of one position. And so DDD has 62 FTEs. Agency management, which is operations, a variety of different HR, is 62.5 positions. And then financial operations, which are the positions we fund through the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, is 12 positions. So our DDA budget, so the Developmental Disabilities Administration, now finally in fiscal year 23, appropriately named, supports more than 2,300 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Included within that administration, people are primarily served through 2 home and community-based services waivers, serving more than 1,800 people. I'll give you the specific number today in another slide or two. Our FY24 total budget for DDA is $152 million. Of that, in local funding is $132 million. And our FY24 budget for DDA includes an enhancement of $744,600, which will allow us to increase the personal needs allowance for people who are in residential placements with the agency, where we're paying for their residential supports and providing the person with a personal needs allowance. People are well aware the personal needs allowance has been $100 for a number of years, going back to before we established our waiver, actually. And the personal needs allowance is increasing for each person from $100 to $150 per month. That increase approximately reflects the increases that we see in the SSI amount from fiscal year 2006 to today. So those, when we looked at the increases in cost of living increases that have occurred, SSI payments have gone up about 50% since 2006 when this was last increased. And so we've increased this by 50%. Our expectation, like with the other district agencies that pay a personal needs allowance, is to be able for the years moving forward to continue increases each year consistent with any cost of living increase that occurs. I will just note for people that what you will see in our budget book is that this is a one-time only enhancement. And so what that means is that next year we will have to once again figure out where that money comes from to make sure that it continues to be in our budget. I don't think there's anyone who would expect or believe that once you've increased someone's rate that you're going to then turn around and decrease it. So it had to do with budget development issues that they were able to do it one time only at this time. And we will be resolving a year from now exactly how we will do it to make sure that every single year this amount is included in the budget and is paid to the people that we support. So as I said, the expectation going forward is that as we get the notice from Social Security about cost of living increase, that people's personal needs allowance would increase consistent with whatever the percentage cost of living increase is. So this slide represents, as you may be, so one thing that's very important to know, if you look at the local funding for our waiver in FY24, local funding for the waiver is $102.1 million. This funding represents about 72% of the agency's overall budget, just so that you understand sort of how the waiver costs really drive the DDS budget overall, not just the DDA budget, but the whole agency's budget is significantly impacted. I think it's really helpful for people to be able to see as well. If you look at the slide that's up right now, in green is the total expenditure amount for the waivers for each fiscal year between 2019, actual amounts through 2021, and budgeted amounts 22, 3, and 4. We actually, I'm sorry, we didn't update the actual amount for fiscal year 22. People may be aware, the district implemented a new financial management system right at the beginning of the fiscal year. And so this has presented some challenges for us in having timely access to the same data we've always gotten in the past. So I apologize if this isn't updated in terms of the actuals for FY22. But what you can see here is the projected increases in the waiver over the years. And what you see is in FY29, waiver expenditures overall were $255 million. In FY23, the budgeted projection is $318.9 million. I believe, and Tony can quietly correct me if I'm wrong, I believe our projection at this time is that we're going to be this year somewhere around $330 million in overall expenditures in FY23. I will say one of the challenges in developing our local funds budget for the waivers each year is, as we presented in the fall about what our budget process is, we develop our budget we begin working with the mayor's budget office to develop our budget in October. So in October of 2022, we were developing our fiscal year 24 budget. And making projections about waiver expenditures looking that far forward is challenging, because beginning at when the public health emergency started in March of 2020, we had an enhanced federal match for our waiver. And we also had the Appendix K, which allowed us to temporarily have flexibilities and changes in payments to the waiver during the public health emergency and for 6 months thereafter. And so whenever the public health emergency finally ended, the enhanced match ends. However, the requirement to continue providing for those enhanced rates and flexibilities continued for 6 months. And so, you know, what we've been challenged with each year is some expectation of when do we think it will end and what effect will that have on costs. Both, will we see a reduction in overall expenditures because we'll be going back to the pre-public health emergency rates that are not in the Appendix K 6 months after the end, and we'll have the obligation to continue paying those enhanced rates while not receiving the enhanced FMAP. We are feeling, I believe, more confident in our projection for fiscal year 24 because the Health and Human Services provided sort of a wind down of the enhanced federal match, so that rather than it just ending at the end of the public health emergency and the match being tied to the end of the public health emergency, it starts to wind down at the end of the public health emergency. So we have received notice that May 11th, the public health emergency ends. Beginning the quarter that starts April 1st, 2023, the federal match begins to reduce. It will go down April 1st from it's currently 6.2%, it will go down to 5%. The following quarter, it will go down to 2.5%. The quarter after that, it will go down to 1.25%. And at that point, and then it goes down to zero. So we at least have projections. And so our projection of $102.1 million in local expenditures for FY24 is based on the awareness of the availability of some enhanced FMAP, but also the expectation that we will be paying for our services to continue until November 2023, which gets us into 2024. And then people should be aware, we did our waiver renewal in October. So our new waiver rates, which will be fully in effect, will go into effect then in either the middle or the end of November of 2023. So status of the waivers currently, there are 1,942 available total IDD waiver slots and 90 total IFS waiver slots. Of those, only 12 IFS waiver slots are currently being utilized. And as of right now, 1,826 IDD waiver slots are being utilized. So there is still capacity within both waivers for new folks coming into the waiver. Each year, based on prior years' data, each year we anticipate a net increase. And so we've built into our waivers a net increase of 50 waiver slots per year. And the way those are allocated is 30 in the IFS waiver and 20 in the IDD waiver. So those numbers will go up each year. Residential costs, budgeted residential costs for FY24 is 27.5 million, keeping in mind that it's still only 12:30, Charlie, so you don't need to push me into RSA yet. So keeping in mind that the residential costs pays not only for residential supports for people here in the district, but it's also covering the cost of, for example, we have still some people who live out of state in non-Medicaid residential placements. It is increasingly a smaller number of people. I want to say it's down to 6. I feel like it's 7, but I can only think of 6 of them. So we'll, in 2 minutes, we'll give you the accurate number. Oh, you just want to stay ahead of me, huh? RSA, Rehabilitation Services Administration, as people know, helps people prepare for, obtain, retain, and advance in employment. The RSA budget for 2024, once corrected, will be $21.6 million. That is 78.7 in federal funds for the most part. The largest part of the RSA budget is the vocational rehabilitation grant, which is a little over $15 million. We also have some smaller grants like the 2 supported employment grants, independent living older blind, and then the assistive technology grant, which is a pass-through. Those services currently are provided through University Legal Services, Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services has the AT Center. And so the 21.3% match is on the VR grant only. There's also a match requirement on the independent living and independent living older blind, as well as a match requirement on we have 2 supported employment grants, and the youth supported employment grant has a match requirement. The other one, we have 1 supported employment grant for services for youth up until the age of 25, and the other is supported employment for people 25 and older. The youth supported employment grant has a match requirement. Lastly, in terms of the VR grant, there is a requirement that 15% of the federal grant funds in the VR grant be reserved to provide pre-employment transition services. And those services are provided by our transition unit at all of the to youth 14 to 22. So we can provide that to youth in schools where we have counselors available in every school attended by a DC student in the DC metropolitan area, as well as we are able to provide some services to youth even as they transition into college. Just to confirm, it is 7 people who are fully locally funded who are in non-Medicaid placements placed out of state. So I had gone over this last fall just as a review for people, talking about with the RSA match requirement, there's also an RSA maintenance of effort requirement. Maintenance of effort means that in local funds, a state is required to continue, once a state reaches a particular level in funding, it has to continue that level. And so our maintenance of effort requirement, which is the second column here, is established by looking back 2 fiscal years, so that, for example, local expenditures in FY20 establish our maintenance of effort requirement for FY22. We had 8.5 million in local expenditures in FY20, and therefore our maintenance of effort requirement in FY22 was 8.5 million. As I had said before, our match requirement for our VR grant is 21.3%. We usually just say it's 80-20, but it's, to be precise, 21.3% of the grant must, or 21.3% of the total grant plus local must be local funds each year. And to the extent states don't meet that match, their grant is reduced. That has never been an issue in the district. Our match requirement in the district, as you can see from this slide, is far below the maintenance of effort requirement, and it's also far below what we have ultimately spent on VR each year. So what happens generally is at the end of the year, we make sure to the extent we have the local funds available, we shift expenditures to local funds to make sure that we're covering our maintenance of effort requirement. We have done that every year so far. You will see in approved budget that there had been, and we've spoken about this before, a $2 million decrease in the approved budget for RSA in fiscal year 21. So far, we have not had a negative impact of that on RSA. We have been able to, we have had adequate local funds to make that up. To the extent we don't meet our maintenance of effort requirement, within a certain time frame, there is a penalty against your federal grant. It doesn't happen immediately. And I know Daryl had a conflict today, so he may not be here to remind me of exactly how long you have, but there is a fairly substantial period of time to make up the maintenance of effort penalty that happens if the state is unable to meet its maintenance of effort. So far, each year, we have made our maintenance of effort. Lastly, and kind of the easiest part of our budget, quite frankly, is the Disability Determination Division. This is 100% federally funded. It's a budget allocation of $13 million. What is unique about this is, to the extent we need more funds, we can generally tell Social Security this, and more funds can be made available. The challenge with this is that we currently have 13 vacant positions in DDD, and those positions always require Social Security Administration approval to fill them because they fund them. 4 of those are currently in recruitment. That generally does not take us that long because we pay district wages and we compete with other states paying their state wages for exactly the same job. These are jobs where people make the medical determination of SSI or SSDI eligibility, and that medical determination is based on federal rules. So it's very much the same job, whichever jurisdiction it's done in. The benefit of that program is that there is an indirect cost recovery, so that the amount spent on personnel for that service, a percentage of that comes to the agency in indirect costs. So we always like to fill those positions as soon as possible. So I'm going to give myself a break from talking and give you a break from listening to me, and allow Allison to share her screen while I can then start looking at the chat, see what the questions are, and we will respond to those questions after Allison and Mark provide us information about all of the events. I've been able to participate in some. Folks in this city do an amazing job coordinating with each other. I'm sure Mark and Allison We'll name every agency that works together because I don't want to start doing that because I could miss someone. But I think there is just a really tremendous coordination amongst agencies to make this a great month. And I've been able to participate in some of them. I will enjoy watching at least while I read these questions to see some representation of all of the different things that happened this month.
Thank you, Director Reese. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Augusto. I am the Supervisor of Intake and Outreach for DC Department of Disability Services. And today I have my amazing colleague who will introduce herself now.
Hi, everyone. This is Allison White, Executive Director of the Developmental Disabilities Council for DC.
And we are excited to give a brief overview of the amazing events that have happened for Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month and give invitation to the ones that have yet to happen. So we're very excited. So before we do that, we just want to say, as you know, one of the goals of DD Awareness Month is to raise awareness about the inclusion of people with developmental disabilities in all facets of community life, as well as awareness of the barriers that people with disabilities still sometimes face in connecting to communities in which they live. Because of this, these events tend to be the highlight of our season. Working on these events tend to be the highlight of our year. And none of this can happen without the amazing partnerships, as Andy mentioned, that happen in our planning committee. So I just wanted to take a second to just shout out some of our partner agencies. In addition to DDS and the DD Council, it's also Project Action, Quality Trust, Disability Rights DC, the USID, and RCM of Washington, including others who have really come together on a weekly basis, yes, weekly basis, to really think about these events, plan these events, implement these events, and then think about events for the future. And so today we're going to just give a nice overview of all the events that have happened and then give, again, an invitation for their future events. And Allison will share her screen, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully I can make this work. Just a quick note for the captioner. There is a short video embedded in part of this presentation, and that video has captions, but the rest of it does not. DC celebrates Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month 2023. This is our calendar of events. We had something going on every week. We kicked off the month with a screening of From Lives Apart to Lives Together.
Forest Haven was an institution created for people with intellectual disabilities, then known as mental retardation. It was where people from the District of Columbia were sent from the 1920s to 1970 to live lives apart and separate from the community. In the late 1970s, there was a constitutional class action lawsuit brought against DC regarding the abuse, neglect, and death of individuals living at Forest Haven. To this day, nearly 400 individuals are buried at Forest Haven. An agreement was made in 1978 to close Forest Haven and relocate residents. Forest Haven officially closed its doors in 1991. Thousands of words have been said and written by families, advocates, the news media, Congress, the court, federal agencies, attorneys, and others on Forest Haven and what it meant to live there. Little has been done, however, to record the experiences from the perspectives of those who actually lived at Forest Haven. Today, there are about 400 former residents of Forest Haven still living. Their time, opportunity, and obligation to listen, learn from, and can do justice by these individuals is now. This project includes the voices of individuals who live at Forest Haven and what it meant to live there. It also highlights their journeys to live lives a part of and included in the community today.
The Ethiopian and Eritrean special needs community held a parent cafe. On March 15th, we had an aging and disability panel discussion and community listening session. We heard from a great panel about aging and disability, including Thomas Mangrum, Alicia Holliday, Vivian Guerra, and our moderator, Gail Cohn. Quality Trust held their annual Better Together reception. The Georgetown University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities organized an event about meeting the mental health and wellness needs of students with intellectual and developmental disabilities in inclusive school settings. We held an event in Spanish about managing stress, cómo manejar el estrés en tiempos difíciles. Throughout the month, we had a social media campaign called #ThroughMyEyes, which highlighted people with developmental disabilities talking about what Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month means to them. The month isn't over. What's next and how can I join? Saturday, March 25th, will be the rescheduled Project Action meeting starting at 10 o'clock a.m. Contact Phyllis Holton to join. Project Action members will talk about what self-advocacy and Project Action means to them. On Thursday, March 30th, we will have the annual DDAM celebration. Mayor Bowser issued a proclamation declaring March 2023 Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Join us at DDS on Thursday, March 30th from 3 to 6 p.m. There will be music, presentations, and art for sale. Hint, bring your wallet. We will have a tribute to Judy Heumann. Rest in power, Judy Heumann. Her memory is a blessing. We hope to see you there.
Thank you, everyone. So if anyone has any questions, we can take questions. But again, this is going to be the first in-person DD Awareness Month since 2019. So we are very excited to have everyone come to DDS on Thursday, the 30th from 3 to 6. Again, 3 to 4 will be an art expo and a DJ. And from 4 to 6 will be the celebration. We will have speeches, a panel discussion, and musical performances at the end. So we're very excited to see you all there. You can always contact myself, again, Mark Augusto, and it's mark.augusto@dc.gov or Allison White at allison.white@dc.gov. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you very much, Allison and Mark. And thanks to everyone who has been really putting on some great events this month for Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. One other note, because I know we were preparing some background information and confirming this week with Mayor Bowser. She's looking forward to joining us at this year's Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month event in person. We have had only 2 questions so far in the chat. The first question was regarding whether we have enough staff since the expansion to manage the increase in applications. We essentially, through ARPA funds, we have essentially doubled our eligibility staff. We have added 2 additional eligibility service coordinators, 1 community liaison, sorry, I always forget the exact title, 1 additional community liaison, and very fortunately, finally, as part of our ARPA plan, we are bringing, we will be arranging for a contract with a neuropsychologist to consult with us around issues related to eligibility questions for people with developmental disabilities. And based on the numbers that we've been reviewing, in fact, we have not seen a corresponding doubling of new intakes. In fact, when I look at the number of applications received in 2020 and this year, the numbers were about first quarter of fiscal year 21 and first quarter of fiscal year 23, the numbers were about the same. And so we are managing quite well with the numbers that we do have. The other question was related to the personal needs allowance, which is when does that revised amount begin? The revised amount will begin at the beginning, October 1, the beginning of fiscal year 24. Shortly after it begins, we will get from Social Security the notice of what the amounts will be beginning January 1, 2024. And to the extent there is a cost of living increase, those would be adjusted accordingly on January 1 of 2024. As I said, in the same way that it will be done for all of the others. People may be aware that people in intermediate care facilities, people in a number of different placements where DHCF pays their personal needs allowance, received an increase as well. Recently, theirs were increased from $70 per month to $100 per month, with the commitment that to the extent the cost of living allowance is made each year in SSI, that personal needs allowance will increase correspondingly. So someone has a question regarding DSP wages. And so you will not see an increase in DSP wages in our budget. However, there was a Budget Support Act legislation passed last year to ensure implementation of the DSP Wage Act that would require that by fiscal year 25, the wages for DSPs reach 117.6% of the living and minimum wage. The way that we are going about increasing those wages, and as I've advised people of in the past, the district is increasing wages across the board for direct line people, not just for the direct service workers that are supporting people with DDA, but also home health aides, other direct support workers in the district. So across the district, DHCF is managing this effort as one of our ARPA initiatives. And the way that this works, we are actually going to it will work in two steps, essentially. The first step has already been mostly completed. Beginning January 1, 2023, providers have been given an allocation that allows them for this calendar year to increase their wages 10% above the living wage. Providers are required, in order to receive that allocation, they're required to submit information to DHCF regarding their number of direct support workers and the current wages paid. And once DHCF receives that, they can then calculate how much would be required so that they can increase their wages by that 10% in the first year. And then what we'll be able to do is in the second year, the wages will be, there will be a second allocation that will allow for further increasing those wages by the full 17.6%, beginning January 2024. And so at that time, there will be sufficient funds through the ARPA initiative to provide for the DSP wages to be at 117.6% of the living wage. The most challenging is that this amount will need to be in our local budget in the fiscal year 25 budget, because after the expenditure of the ARPA funds, we will then need for those funds to be in our waiver. And so we will need to be seeing a pretty significant enhancement in our budget for FY25. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier this year was the importance of people. Mayor Bowser, since she came to office, during budget development, she has always had community forums, reached out to the community, gotten input from people about what their priorities are. It's going to be very important next year that people are there and supporting the need for that enhancement to be included in our FY25 budget. We will, of course, be talking to the mayor. Everyone recognizes Mayor Bowser made sure that this was one of our ARPA initiatives. There were adequate funds allocated so that we could, within our ARPA plans, make this happen before the legislation required. It will, as I said, occur by January 2024. There'll be adequate funds allocated to provider agencies. We haven't yet had 100% compliance by provider agencies. Some of them have not yet given DHCF all the data they need so that they can get their allocation. This doesn't change those provider agencies' obligations to increase their wages effective January 1, 2023 by 10%. So I do see a question, does the FY24 budget contemplate full funding of the 1.7? No, as I just explained, you won't see funding for DSP wages in our budget until FY25. Can people get a copy of this recording? We post this on our website by Wednesday, the week after. So every PowerPoint that we have, as well as a recording, is posted on our website. And perhaps, Charlisa, you could type for people where they can find it on the website. I'm seeing a question that I don't really understand. Oh, how much does active treatment day program provider get paid daily for services for fiscal year 24? So active treatment is part of the payment that's made to intermediate care facilities, and those payments are made by DHCF. Those are not in our budget, and I can't tell you, but you could ask DHCF how those payments are broken down. The link for people to see where these documents are posted in our website is in the chat. Don't look now, you won't see today's documents. As I said, you'll see them by Wednesday of next week. I don't see any other questions. For people who were not able to tune in to the mayor's budget presentation earlier this week, one thing I do want to emphasize, which she spoke about, and I know that I continue to remain concerned about, as I think many people here probably do, is that, which is, we have regular meetings with DD agency directors across the country. It's on everyone's mind. With the enhanced FMAP with the enhanced federal match for a few years, we had these additional funds. With the ARPA funds, we had additional funds. Those funds end, and with the, one of the things we've seen in the district, which is happening more slowly than I think had been anticipated, but is happening, is that we're seeing commercial property evaluations go down. And so that means that their tax amount goes down. That causes district revenue to go down. So at the same time, we see these federal dollars drying up. We're also beginning to see reductions in expected revenue in the district. One of the reasons for the reduction in telework is also the fact that we need a vibrant downtown in the District of Columbia, because those people go out and they eat lunch here and they pay taxes when they eat lunch and they pay to park, and all of those things generate revenue for the district. FY25 is going to be a very challenging year. I'm glad to report that FY24 looks great. I was very happy that the mayor was able to identify funds to support our increase in the personal needs allowance. As I said, we're increasing it 50%, which is catching people up to the cost of living increases that everyone else who gets SSI or SSDI has seen incrementally over the years. And we hope to not get behind again going forward. So, 24 is actually looking very good. I hope that people will come to our budget hearing, which is next Wednesday, testify about the budget, about the importance of supporting the budget as presented, not making any reductions to the budget, because everything that is, we have what we need in this budget, and we have what we need. So please make sure that that is communicated. So there's a question here about the provider application for the DSP wage increase. So those people should speak to Sam at DHCF, I believe. That information can be submitted at any time. Providers don't get their funds until they submit the information. They are required to increase the wages. And I'm pretty sure I unfortunately was out of town on Tuesday this week. There was a meeting with DHCF. I don't believe there's a deadline yet, but that people can still reach out to DHCF to submit those forms. Sam, whose last name is, anyone going to help me with this? At DHCF can help you. And Ian has confirmed there is no deadline yet. People should reach out to
Go ahead.
Woldegorgius. I will type his name. Oh, good. Someone typed his name. Thank you very much. Someone sort of typed his name in the chat. I will, perfect. Someone has provided, there are several people here who know exactly who Sam is. People have provided Sam's email address in the chat. So people who wish to follow up with him can see his email address and communicate with him about those allocations to increase your DSP wages. Okay, I do not see any other questions. So as I said, our budget hearing is on Wednesday. We hope that people will find the time. It is still virtual, so logging in fairly easy. And I wonder, Dan, if we have, do we have instructions on what people need to do if they wish to testify? Perhaps before we log off, we can put that in the chat so that anyone who wishes to testify will have the information about how to go about doing that. We hope there are lots of people testifying about the importance of supporting what I said. As I said, I think it's a, given our difficult times coming, a really great budget for Mayor Bowser this year. And I hope that people are able to get out and support that so that we maintain that budget. Council has until May to make any adjustments to the budget, which then gets approved like in June and is forwarded to Congress for final approval. But it's very important that people let the mayor know, or that let the council know to support the budget as submitted by the mayor would be, of course, our position. There is a link in the chat for people to sign up to testify. The budget hearing starts at 9 a.m. Just like with our performance, fortunately, unlike our performance hearing, it starts at 9 a.m. And it will start with the Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing, then the Office of Disability Rights, and then DDS. But people can sign up, can click on the link that's provided here in the chat so that you can sign up to testify. And we look forward to seeing a bunch of you on Wednesday. And I will say on Thursday as well. I look forward to seeing people in person on Thursday. Have a great day, a great weekend, everyone, and we will talk with you later.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.